Well, today there was a couple of things I wanted to talk about and share with you from my experience, my 30 years of management. And they're kind of related. We'll talk a little bit about that and how they're related when, as I go through the discussion. And feel free to pipe in if you can. But I hired at Lockheed when I was 19. I came from a family that never went to school other than high school. In fact, I was the third one to graduate from high school. And my view of my world was I was going to get a job and work really hard and do that job for the rest of my life. Well, I ended up working at Raytheon for a couple of years in microelectronics, and so I ended up getting sucked up into Lockheed during the C4 microelectronics time frame because there were so few people at that time that really had that background. But the interesting part about it was I had a manager who said, gee, you should go to college. And it wasn't even something that I hadn't thought about. And then 2 weeks later, after I just started, she says, I'd like you to go on swing shift and be the lead. And I was 19, and I'm like, well, do you think those people will do what I tell them? I mean, I had no concept of being a lead or a leader or getting an education. That just wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something that I saw. So I went along, and I became the lead, became the group leader, eventually became the supervisor. And one day they decided to send me to this class where they showed this video called the Pygmalion Effect. And they showed the statue that Pygmalion had built of this woman. And he fell in love with the woman. He fell in love with the statue. And he believed in that statue so much that it actually became a live woman. And they were talking about how what you believe about people can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It can become reality. And at that moment in the class, all of a sudden this light bulb went on for me, and I said, oh my gosh. That's what my manager did to me. She believed that I could be a leader. She believed I could get a degree. She believed all these things about me that I didn't believe about me. And it just dawned on me that it was her belief in me that changed my life. It was her belief in me that made me aspire to do things I wouldn't even have thought of. Wouldn't even gone there. So then at that point in my life, I was 23, I thought, oh my gosh, how does that affect the people that work for me? How does it affect the people that are my friends, family, and everything else? And I started thinking about what you believe about people actually can become self-fulfilling. And so as leaders, you need to be careful, and you need to be inspiring by really understanding the talent of your people and really understanding what they really have the potential to be and believing in that potential. Because in many ways, what you believe will affect their performance and how they do and whether they go to school and whether they develop, whether they, increase their abilities and, learn how to do other things. What you believe about your people really does become a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you believe about your kids, what you believe about your friends. You have to understand that if you have a positive outlook about people, if you have a positive outlook, you're actually pushing out this positive thing. People tend to follow that. They tend to say, oh, well, yeah, I can do that. I can be positive. I can believe in that. And that's so much what mentoring's about. When you bring someone in and you're mentoring them over time and you say, no, you can do this. Take the risk. I believe in you. It's that belief in them that helps them to stretch and to take the risk and take a job that's scary because they've never done it before, which is why I tell them, if you're not scared, you're not learning. So I wanted to share that with you because how you interact with your people and how you believe about your people does change their behavior. It changes their abilities. It can grow them in areas that they don't know about, that they don't think about. And so if you think somebody is really good at something, you want to nurture that and foster that and try to reward that so that they grow in that arena. Now, how does that relate to having a vision of the future? Well, in some ways, they act the same way. If you sit down in your organization and you say, my vision of the future is we're all going to work to death and we're going to get tired and we're going to work lots of overtime and, okay, we're going to support the fleet, and that's it, that is what your organization will be. Okay? If you say, well, I believe that I can develop my people, and 80% of the people in my organization are going to go off and get bigger and better jobs. Okay? Well, I had a cable shop full of women doing cable work. Okay? You can't come in at a much lower entry-level position. But here I was, this 23-year-old person who had a manager that believed in her, got me to go to school, got me to develop, pushed me into leadership, taught me how to lead. And I looked around at all my cable builders and said, well, gee, they have the same potential I have. They can do things, they can grow, they can. And so I started talking to them about their development, about going to school, and we found some classes that they could go to, and they started taking some classes in QA, they started taking classes in procurement, and pretty soon, I was losing people. And in 1 year alone, 105 of those women got promoted. That's how powerful your belief in people can be. And so if you're not saying to yourself, gee, you know, I'm going to lose half my people, and you work towards that goal, that you're going to make them the best they can be, and you're going to grow them and develop them, if you have that belief, if you have that vision for your group, it will happen. Only because it gets fostered and nurtured, and everybody gets positive reinforcement, and they go do it. The other part about having a vision, if you say, well, my vision of the future is to kind of ward everybody off and keep status quo. Okay, well, that's what you're going to have. But if you sit down and you say, what vision should I have for my organization? And you say, gee, strategically, okay, I'm back 5 years ago at SwiftPack, and I say, okay, we're going to hire up the guys from AB, and we're going to get ready for this and stuff like that. But Pat Allensworth and I had this vision that someday we were going to take over Rancher Body. Okay, well, how did that change what we were doing? Because that was the vision of our future, we got with Nancy and with Troy, the people that we're hiring, and we said, you know, when you hire, why don't we try to make sure they can qualify for PRP? Because if push comes to shove and we actually do get Rancher Body, we can pull some of these guys out and they can help us to be successful. Well, that's what exactly happened. What changed in our behavior? If we didn't have that vision of the future, we wouldn't have hired them to qualify for PRP. We wouldn't have made sure they had the skill set to do both Rancher Body work or missile work. So that's just a little taste of, you know, those things. If you say, gee, my vision of the future is where we just naturally do CI. It's not a big program. We're not doing, you know, all this kind of garbage that goes with it. It's real. We work on problems. We work on issues. We work on things that actually can help us. And so I started developing green belts and black belts and, you know, people that could do that kind of, those tasks. Okay? Well, would I have been doing that if my vision of the future didn't include improvement and getting better and doing better? I wouldn't have done that. Swiftland hasn't done that. They have one black belt. Okay? They do hardly any CI improvement because that's not in their vision. Not because they're lazy, not because their vision is support the fleet, you know, get the work out, get the missiles built, but they don't and haven't included in their vision this whole idea of improvement and getting better. And how did it help us? How did that vision help us? Well, we went from 18 missiles a year to 24 missiles a year without ever adding people. That couldn't have happened without improvement. And it couldn't have happened without tasking the whole facility to improve. MAB was drowning doing 18 missiles. I mean, they were just, you know, flailing and having a hard time. And I said, you know, Buddy went in the building one day and he says, Carol, it's so disorganized. They don't know where their tools are. They don't know how to, you know, find. It takes them 2 hours just to get ready for a move just because they got to go find everything. I said, well, they need to do 6S. Well, instead of dumping 6S on Nancy, who's already overtasked and everybody's already working the weekends and they're already working 24 hours a day, we said, well, gee, who's good at 6S? And since we had been developing the talent in the Cal Lab too, and they had done a bunch of 6S projects, we said, hey, Cal Lab, would you come over to MAB and help them get organized? And so a few of the people from the Cal Lab went over to MAB, set everything up, laid out a thing, taped on the floor, put everything where it needed to be, set up, you know, a structure of where, you know, and they did the 6S. Well, now all of a sudden MAB's producing better. But this whole idea of if you have a vision of your organization and you really use everybody to help everybody else, you know, for a while we had the what did you do for MAB this week? And every week the managers had to send me a little email saying what they did to help MAB each week. Okay. Well, the whole point in that was how can we leverage everybody here, you know, to help MAB go from 18 to 24, which is what we needed. And we did it. And we've done a bunch of stuff like that. For Intrabody, you guys have done all kinds of just do it's and quick and rapid prototyping and all that kind of, you know. Well, if improvement wasn't, you know, wasn't in our future, you wouldn't be doing it. And you're doing it naturally. You're not doing big charters and, you know. I mean, it's great you got charters and stuff, and we do enough of that so we can get credit for it in Sunnyvale. But there's a whole lot of stuff we don't document. Because if you documented everything, people would stop doing it. Okay, so we do document enough that we meet our goals and requirements in the CI world. But really, in fact, you guys are doing it all the time. But that's because it was part of the vision of the future. That was because that's where we were headed. You know, and the whole idea of developing people and having people, you know, grow and go to school. Well, you know what? When I got here, there was no degree programs here. You couldn't get your degree here. So there wasn't any way for anybody to succeed. And at that point, Barb Murphy and Jermaine knew some of the schools, and they talked to them, and we talked to the Navy, and we said, gee, if we can come up with some groups of people who are willing to go to school, will you hold classes? Well, yeah, that'd be great. So City did it, and then pretty soon Phoenix did it, and then Chapman did it, and you know, now we got all these programs. Okay, because that was part of our vision. And that's what we did. We tried to help do that. And then we said, gee, where are we going to get all these engineers? We need engineers. So that's part of our vision of the future. So I started going community meetings. I started going and talking to Olympic College management. I started talking to the captains and the commands. And we said, we need a 4-year engineering degree program. 3 years later, Olympic College now offers 5 different engineering degrees, 4-year programs on their facility at night, so that our employees, and I think we have 3 employees that are in that program right now, and the military guys can all go to school and be engineers. And when we need to hire them in 5 years, you know, Lockheed alone is going to need 60,000 engineers in the next 5 years. Just Lockheed. I can tell you what's going to happen in the future. Whoever gets the engineers is going to win the contracts. That's how it's going to play. So it's the talent that Dion's bringing in today, and the fact that we have people like Jeremy that went to Sunnyvale. You know, we may have to lose some of our people to the other parts of Lockheed Martin to help everybody be successful. But that's part of our vision, is growing people and helping them to learn. So you need to think about your organization and look downstream 5 years and say, what is my vision of the future in 5 years? What would I look like? What would I like to look like? Can I articulate to myself where I think I can be in 5 years? Or get your people together and talk to them and say, gee, where should we be in 5 years? The Cal Lab, 1/3 of their business ought to be coming from other commands, from other money sources. That's ought to be part of the vision. You know, engineering, you know, their, you know, their vision is we're going to have a MAP3, we're going to have a LAPSEC, we're going to have, you know, possibly the, you know, VIMP2 and VIMP3 and everything else. So as we head towards these visions, if you don't have those kinds of visions of the future, you'll tend to be self-fulfilling and stay status quo where you are today. And that's what makes it so important for you to really think about, what do you want your organization to look like? What do you want your employees to look like? And what do you want to look like? What is your vision for yourself? Are you relying on your boss to have a vision for you, and you're not relying on your own self? You know, before I came here, you know, 10 years before I got this job here, I could see myself in this chair. Because I sat down and I said, okay, I don't have an engineering degree, so in Lockheed Martin you don't become a vice president without an engineering degree. So what is my future? The best I can do is director. So if I grow to become a director, I'm going to end up stopping at that point. What job do I want a dead end in? What job will be challenging and fun and interesting and can keep me tasked and interested for the rest of my career? I said, oh, I know what it is. It's the resident director job at Swiftback. And I worked towards that goal for 10 years. And like I tell people, this is my 26th job. I couldn't have gotten here without taking those 26 jobs. Because it took those 26 jobs to develop me and broaden me and get me to understand how, the depth and breadth of the program so that I could do a good job at this job. So you need to think about, what is your vision of who you want to be in the future? Do you want to be a vice president in Sunnyvale? Well, that's a whole different path. You need to think about what I need to do to do that. Do you want to be in my job? You have to think about what is it I need to do. Have you mapped out the 20 jobs between where you are today and my job? Because that path probably is going to take you to some other places, like Swiftland and ER and Sunnyvale Engineering, and that's what you got to map out. You got to map out what is it your future is going to hold for you. What are you going to do about school? Are you going to finish your degree? Are you going to, go get the next level degree? Are you going to, what is it you want to do? Where do you want to go? But without a vision, and all you're doing is just meeting the challenges every day, that is where you'll be. And so I think it's important. It's something that you need to spend time thinking about for yourself, for your employees, for your kids, for your grandchildren, for your great-grandchildren. For those of you who don't know, my granddaughter had a baby the 17th of February. But that's kind of what I wanted to share today. Do you guys have any questions about what I've talked about so far?
I'd like to throw out one thing where you were talking about the Pygmalion Effect. You make it sound kind of easy, like if you think well of your people and believe in them and that something's going to happen. And I think with some people that's probably true, but I would think that probably a lot of people are sitting here thinking that sounds kind of like pie in the sky for a bunch of people that wouldn't respond.
It's what you do every day to reinforce people's behavior that causes them to grow and change. If you reinforce not growing and changing, that's what will happen. If you reinforce growing and changing, no matter how small the growth is, they will continue to grow. So it's how you respond to what you believe, not just believing it. It's responding to it every day and saying, the person's making this progress and recognizing the progress and saying, wow, that's great. You moved from here to here. Because then they're not like, oh, that was cool. Let's try that again. They move from here to here. Oh, I can do that. It really is, and you have to believe it. You can't just be you can't just say, well, I'm going to pretend to be positive. Pretending to be positive isn't a belief. It requires real belief. It really does. There's a big difference between I'm just going to be yippee skippy and happy and and do this rote thing where I'm going to reward everybody for the behavior. If you don't really believe in that person, they will know that. It won't work. It won't become real because you don't believe it. That's why you think, oh, I'm going to think positive about my kids and then they'll be good. If you don't really believe that, you're not going to reinforce the behaviors that you should be rewarding based on your belief system. So.
Boy, that begs the question. So is that a learned behavior, or is that a personality thing? In listening to you, it's incredible. You're an optimist, a remarkable optimist. I'd like to say that I am. I'm not. So the message that I'm hearing is an incredible message, but for me, I struggle with it. So it's kind of back to what Susan was saying. I mean, I'd like to believe that people are going to come through to me, for me, but if they keep disappointing me, at what point in time do you just keep charging the windmill and trying to pump them up and get them going in the right direction? And how do you stay the course on that?
But if you believe it, you don't have to force yourself to do it. It is a type of faith, not a type of behavior. It's a faith belief, not a learned ability to be a public speaker or have good communication skills, or it really is a step of faith that you say, I believe positive about people, and I'm always, I'm going to head that direction about people. You have to get that belief system about people. If it's not a belief, then it won't carry forward, because eventually you only behave on what you believe. You can only behave so far doing leadership spectrum if you don't believe in leadership spectrum. You can do rote and you can take classes how to communicate positively, and you can be yippy skippy, but if you don't believe it,
right, it's never going to come true. I hear that. I want to go there was another issue that you talked about that was of interest to me. How do you, in encouraging people to always kind of change jobs and broaden their horizons and everything, how do you ensure that you continue to cover the fundamentals of blocking and tackling in the business? How do you do that? Is it you've got to have the big scheme and make sure that you're always 10 steps ahead and have somebody replace somebody because you anticipate that somebody doing something else?
yes.
So that's a remarkable skill to have that.
Yes.
And I'd like to say that we all do. I guarantee you that I don't. So how do you ensure that you are always covering the fundamentals of business?
What we do here is the cross-training matrices. For every group here, for every group leader here, we have a list of tasks that group does. Here's the fundamental tasks of that group. And we keep track of who we have trained in that group and who we trained in the past that went to other groups. And all of that is documented so that we don't lose an ability to do some of the blocking and tackling. We always make sure we have 2 people, like in the manager one's objectives this year, it says they will have 2 people trained for every function in their organization. So for them to be successful on their PRS, they have to have 2 people trained in every task in their organization. And that's on a piece of paper, and it's documented, and I can go in and view it, they go in and update it. And so when we go to do the PRSs, we're going to print it out and say, okay, Joe Pack, you have 3 things that you didn't get people cross-trained for. Okay, well, I lost them, they got promoted, and blah, blah. Well, you know what? Your goal was to have 2 people. Are you thinking ahead? Are you doing what you need to do? Maybe you need to be 3 and 4 deep if you have promising people. Or you might need to look at it a little differently. I talked to, when Wayne Decker was the manager in MAB 1, he had a lot of real promising people. And I said, well, you know what? You got to look at the people that you have. And the ones that are really good mechanics and who want to be mechanics and their goal in life is to be the best mechanic in the world, you need to license them in everything. Not spend your time licensing all these people that are really talented that you really like, and you're putting all this in them and they leave, and then you put this all in another person and they leave, and you're not putting it in the person that's holding on to the blocking and the tackling and doing what needs to be done. Because development is in 2 places. You can develop what you do and that you're a mechanic and make them the best kind of mechanic they can be, and send them to training to do inspections, send them to training to know how to do potting materials, send them to get certifications, learning how to solder. I mean, whatever, you got to look at each CalLab person and say, how can I make them the best CalLab person I can make them? What classes can I send them to? What kinds of things can we do to grow them and give them strength to be the best technician you can? There's the blocking and the tackling. Then you have the other people who emerge as leaders, that emerge as planners, that emerge as advanced thinkers. Those people, you try to leverage their strengths and move them around so you get them in a job that fits their passion. And then they grow in that job. And you get somebody like Tom Stroop who absolutely loves CI and loves to do events and loves to improve things. And, his passion and his job end up coming together. So, but it does do the blocking and tackling. You do have to say, well, who do I need? I need somebody that's going to love to fix support equipment. And you have the Kramers and some of the other extremely talented people that are doing that. But as a manager, you got to document it all so you understand where you're at. And how deep are you? And do you have all the right people trained? And which ones are going to retire? And which ones are going to get promoted? And you got to have that depth in your organization based on all that knowledge of those people. That's how you keep doing the blocking and tackling while you develop people to succeed and go on to other jobs.
It seemed like that a lot of that hasn't happened. where you move managers around so frequently, or or they're moved frequently, or other people are moved frequently, so that pretty soon nobody knows whether they know what's in their jobs or not, and that seems like that's happened here.
Well, that's why we try to write it down, to capture the knowledge of what's contained in each group. That's why we have the matrices where, the group leader who has the most knowledge of the group identifies all the skill sets. So the manager who comes in, who may be new, can look at that and say, oh, I've got this person qualified to do this and this person qualified to do this, and they can assign them, to the right task. But you got to understand, we've been doing that for several years, and we haven't been doing exceptionally at it. We've been mediocre at it. Okay? So this will be the first year the managers actually are writing on their PRS, I will have 2 people trained for every function in my organization. Okay? Because that's my vision, and that's where I want to go, and that's where I want to be. And so if I want to be there, I have to measure it. So guess who's going to get measured? Now, are they going to be more interested this year in the cross-training matrix than they were last year? I guarantee it. So you need to think about that too. When you have those visions and goals and things in the future, at some point you got to put it on somebody's PRS and say, I expect you to do this. Okay? In order for you to be successful, I expect this. And all of those pieces that you're putting on the PRSs have to come together to give you the organization that you're looking for.
I have another question. Perception. My perception of myself versus your perception of me, it might be that I think I have the skill set to be a vice president. I might think that, and I doubt anybody in this room would agree to that. But if you're my manager, and that's my goal, is to be the vice president, how do you manage my perception of myself versus my real skill set?
What you say is, okay, you want to be a vice president, what are the 35 jobs that you're going to have between the job you have today and that? Okay, let's map it out. Well, that's a lot to map out. The person probably can't do it. They can't map it out. So you say, okay, well, let's map out the first 2 steps. And let's focus on the next 2 steps. And let's stay focused on those next 2 steps, and then when you get there, then we'll focus on the next 2 steps. But we can't focus on the 35 jobs from here. It's too hard to do. So let's do what we can do, and then the person starts focusing on where they are today. And that's when you can start shaping them into what you believe their passion and their strengths are. And they start getting into a job that they really love, and then pretty soon they're not thinking about being a vice president anymore. They're thinking about, I love this job. I enjoy what I do. This is just really cool that I get to come to work every day. So, does that help?
Sure. I just think there's oftentimes a disconnect.
Well, especially the new generation that's coming in.
Yeah,
because
they want to have your job tomorrow.
That is the new generation. They look way down there and say, well, I'm going to be the vice president. I'm going to be the CEO. I heard one of the newbies coming in saying he's going to be the CEO of Lockheed. That's great. What's your first step? Let's focus on the first step, because you got to accomplish the steps one at a time, not 50 at a time. Because
So
you don't get to skip the steps.
So the secret then is to manage the steps and stay positive in managing those steps.
Right.